For decades, Robert Duvall was the calm in Hollywood's storm. Disciplined, professional, respected. He didn't gossip, he didn't fight. He simply acted and became one of the greatest of all time. 7 Oscar nominations, 1 win, more than 100 films. From The Godfather to Apocalypse Now, his performances defined generations. But behind that quiet legend was a man who never forgot betrayal. At 94, Duvall finally broke his silence, and what he revealed left Hollywood stunned. 6 names, 6 actors he swore he would never work with again. Some were mentors, some were brothers. One helped him win his only Oscar, and Duvall still hates him to this day. The reasons? Brutal. Friendships destroyed by money, egos that poisoned entire sets. Directors he called enemies of all actors, and one name on that list, his own idol, the man he studied for years, only to watch that respect turn to disgust. This is the side of Robert Duvall Hollywood never shows. The grudges, the anger, the truth he kept buried for decades. Now we reveal the 6 actors he hated the most, and the stories that made even Hollywood's calmest man finally snap. Number 6. Al Pacino. Let's start with the most heartbreaking one. Al Pacino. Yeah, you heard that right. The Godfather duo, the brothers who changed cinema forever. Back in the early 1970s, Robert Duvall and Al Pacino weren't just co-stars, they were best friends. They shared an apartment in Beverly Glen, splitting the rent down the middle. They ate cheap canned noodles together, talked about their dreams late into the night. They called each other brothers. When they weren't rehearsing, they were helping each other practice lines. When one got rejected at an audition, the other was there with encouragement. They were struggling actors together, fighting for their big break. And then, The Godfather happened in 1972. Francis Ford Coppola cast them both. Pacino as Michael Corleone, the reluctant son who becomes a ruthless boss. Duvall as Tom Hagen, the adopted son and family lawyer. The movie became an instant classic, changed both their lives overnight. Pacino and Duvall became stars, and their friendship seemed unbreakable. They did The Godfather Part 2 together in 1974. Again, magic on screen, brotherhood off screen. But then came The Godfather Part 3 in 1990. And that's when everything fell apart. Paramount Pictures sent out the contracts, and the numbers were shocking. Al Pacino, $5 million plus 5% of the profits. Robert Duvall, $1 million, flat, no profit sharing. Let that sink in for a second. Pacino was getting 5 times more money, plus a cut of the profits. Duvall was being offered table scraps. Now, you might think, well, Pacino was the star. And yeah, Michael Corleone is the lead role. But here's the thing, Tom Hagen was crucial to the story. He was the family's conscience, the voice of reason, the moral center of the entire Corleone family. Without Tom Hagen, The Godfather doesn't work the same way, and Paramount was telling Duvall, through those contract numbers, that he didn't matter. That he was just background, just someone filling space behind the real star. The message was crystal clear. One man mattered, the other didn't. Duvall read those papers, sat there for a moment. Then he folded them up, stood up, and walked out of the room. Hours later, a fax arrived on Francis Ford Coppola's desk. It said, "I won't return just to be someone's backdrop." That single sentence ended 20 years of friendship. Now here's where it gets even more painful. The studio tried to fix it. They set up meetings, tried to negotiate, offered slight increases, but Duvall refused to budge. Not about the money, about the principle, about being respected. And you know what Al Pacino did? Nothing. He could have taken a pay cut. He could have demanded the studio pay Duvall fairly. He could have stood up for his brother. Instead, he took the $5 million and stayed silent. That silence said everything. To Duvall, it meant their friendship was never real. That when it came down to money versus loyalty, Pacino chose money every single time. "You can't preach family on screen," Duvall told a reporter years later, "and forget it off screen. The Godfather Part 3 went into production without Robert Duvall. They replaced Tom Hagen with a completely different character. The movie was good, but critics immediately noticed something was missing. The Chicago Tribune wrote, "When Duvall left, The Godfather lost its moral compass. That's how important he was." And Paramount had treated him like he was replaceable. Duvall retreated to his farm in Virginia, started taking smaller, more honest roles, movies that meant something to him personally, not big blockbusters. Meanwhile, Pacino kept doing huge films. Scarface, Heat, Scent of a Woman. Their paths never crossed again. Not professionally, not personally. At the 2011 Oscars, there was a big Godfather reunion, all the surviving cast members on stage together. Duvall and Pacino stood only a few feet apart. Cameras caught the moment. Both men stared straight ahead, faces blank, eyes locked on anything but each other. No handshake, no smile, not even a nod. 20 years of brotherhood, destroyed by a contract dispute and one man's silence. That's the tragedy of this story. It didn't have to end this way. Pacino could have done the right thing. The studio could have paid Duvall fairly. Instead, ego and money destroyed one of Hollywood's greatest friendships, and Robert Duvall never forgave him. Number 5. Francis Ford Coppola. If losing Al Pacino was heartbreaking, losing Francis Ford Coppola was even worse, because Coppola wasn't just a friend or co-star. He was Duvall's teacher, his mentor, the man who shaped his entire understanding of cinema. It all started in 1971, during casting for The Godfather. Coppola was under massive pressure from the studio. They wanted big-name stars. They wanted safe choices. But when Coppola saw Robert Duvall, he pointed at him and said, "He's the Tom Hagen I've been looking for." That single sentence changed Duvall's entire life. Before The Godfather, Duvall was doing okay. He'd been in a few films, had some theater work, but he wasn't a star. Coppola made him one. Tom Hagen became one of cinema's most iconic characters, the quiet consigliere, the adopted son who wasn't Italian but was more loyal than anyone. Duvall owed everything to Coppola, his career, his fame, his legacy. So when Coppola betrayed him years later, it cut deeper than anything else. But let me back up, because the cracks started showing way before The Godfather Part 3. In 1976, Coppola started filming Apocalypse Now in the Philippines, one of the most ambitious war movies ever made. Duvall played Lieutenant Colonel Kilgore, the helicopter commander who loves the smell of napalm in the morning. It's one of his most famous roles. That scene, with helicopters flying overhead and explosions everywhere, is legendary, but filming it nearly killed him. During the napalm scene, Duvall collapsed from dehydration. The heat was unbearable. Real explosions, real fire. The whole set felt like an actual war zone. Duvall's lips cracked from the heat. He could barely stand. And you know what Coppola said to him? "Do it again. The light isn't right." Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "Let's take a break." Just, "Do it again." Duvall, being the professional he is, obeyed. He got up, did another take, threw up blood, and still finished the scene. The film went on to win the Palme d'Or at Cannes, one of cinema's greatest achievements. But Duvall's respect for Coppola never recovered after that day. He started seeing Coppola differently. Not as a genius mentor, but as someone willing to sacrifice actors for his vision. Someone brilliant, yes, but also cruel. He became another Brando, Duvall later said. Brilliant, but cruel. Still, they maintained a professional relationship. Until 1990, The Godfather Part 3 was happening, and the studio offered Duvall that insulting $1 million contract. Duvall refused, walked away, made his statement. And here's what really hurt. Coppola didn't fight for him. The man who once said, "He's the Tom Hagen I've been looking for, just let him walk away." Coppola could have demanded the studio pay Duvall fairly. He was the director. He had power. He could have made it happen. Instead, he let money dictate the decision. Duvall went public with his feelings, declaring, "I won't act in a film about family if that family doesn't respect each other." The statement was aimed at the studio. But everyone knew he also meant Coppola. After the movie came out without him, Coppola apparently felt guilty. He sent handwritten letters to Duvall, tried to apologize, tried to explain. But Duvall never responded. He stayed completely silent. Those letters went unanswered. The phone calls were never returned. What started as the relationship between teacher and student, mentor and protege, ended in silence and contempt. They never met again after that. Not at film festivals, not at tributes. Not even when other Godfather cast members tried to arrange reunions. For Duvall, it wasn't just about the money. It was about loyalty, about respect, about standing up for the people who helped build your legacy. Coppola failed that test, and Duvall never forgave him. Number 4. Marlon Brando. Now, if losing his mentor was painful, losing his idol was devastating. Marlon Brando. When Robert Duvall was a young actor studying his craft, he watched 2 films over and over until he memorized every breath, every pause, every gesture. On the Waterfront and A Streetcar Named Desire, both starring Marlon Brando. To Duvall, Brando was a god, the greatest actor who ever lived, the man who changed what acting could be. So when Duvall got cast in The Godfather and learned he'd be working alongside Marlon Brando himself, he thought he was meeting his hero. The first day Brando was scheduled to arrive on set, Duvall showed up early, prepared, excited. Brando showed up 2 hours late, cigarette in hand, sunglasses on, 3 assistants trailing behind him. And just like that, the illusion shattered. See, Duvall valued discipline and preparation above everything. He believed acting was serious work that demanded respect. Brando treated it like a game. He refused to rehearse, claimed he worked better when things were spontaneous. He demanded that cue cards be taped everywhere, on walls, on props, even on other actors' backs, so he wouldn't have to memorize his lines. During scenes, he'd change dialogue without warning anyone, completely derailing the rhythm other actors had prepared. For someone like Duvall, who planned every gesture and every pause, this was chaos. He was the soul of the film. Duvall said years later, and the enemy of every actor inside it. That's a brutal statement. The soul of the film and the enemy of every actor. What Duvall meant was this. Yes, Brando's performance as Don Vito Corleone was brilliant, iconic, unforgettable. But his behavior on set made everyone else's job 10 times harder. Then came the money issue. When The Godfather became a massive hit, Paramount quietly paid Brando an extra $50,000 bonus. Duvall and the other actors? Nothing. When Duvall found out, he walked out of the press room in disgust, refused to do any more promotional interviews for days. It wasn't about being jealous. It was about fairness, about the studio rewarding bad behavior while ignoring everyone else's hard work. But the moment that truly destroyed Duvall's respect for Brando came at the 1,973 Oscars. Brando won Best Actor for The Godfather, a deserved win. His performance was incredible, but Brando didn't show up to accept it. Instead, he sent a Native American activist named Sacheen Littlefeather to refuse the award on live television. She gave a speech about Hollywood's treatment of Native Americans. Half of America applauded the political statement. Robert Duvall saw it differently. He saw betrayal. He turned our work into a protest, Duvall told a friend. He cared more about shock than craft. To Duvall, Brando had taken a film that hundreds of people worked on for years, a film that meant something artistically, and used it as a political prop. Whether you agree with Brando's statement or not, Duvall felt disrespected. He felt like Brando had made The Godfather about himself instead of about the work. From that moment, admiration turned to contempt. Over the next 3 decades, Duvall and Brando never worked together again, never spoke at industry events, actively avoided each other. When Brando died in 2004, Hollywood held memorial services. Tributes poured in from actors around the world. Robert Duvall refused to attend the funeral. Instead, he sent Francis Ford Coppola a white card with just 3 words written on it: "Let it end." That's it. 3 words to sum up decades of disappointment. To Duvall, The man who once taught him what great acting could be now represented everything he despised about Hollywood. The arrogance, the lack of discipline, the prioritizing fame over craft. Marlon Brando was his idol, and he became his enemy. Number 3. Stanley Kubrick. Now here's where things get really controversial, because Robert Duvall didn't just dislike Stanley Kubrick. He publicly called him an enemy of actors. At a 2010 Hollywood Reporter roundtable, Duvall was sitting with Ryan Gosling, Jeff Bridges, and other top actors. The conversation turned to great directors. Everyone was praising different filmmakers. Then someone mentioned Stanley Kubrick, and Duvall said something that made the entire room go silent. To me, the great Stanley Kubrick was an actor's enemy. I can point to movies he's done the worst performances I've ever seen. Ryan Gosling raised his eyebrows. Jeff Bridges chuckled nervously. The moderator tried to move on, but Duvall didn't smile, didn't backtrack. He meant every single word. Now, for context, Stanley Kubrick is considered one of the greatest directors in film history. 2001, A Space Odyssey, The Shining, A Clockwork Orange, Full Metal Jacket, Barry Lyndon. Masterpieces, revolutionary films. So for an actor as respected as Robert Duvall to call him an enemy? That's shocking. But here's the thing, Duvall's anger wasn't personal. It was philosophical. He despised Kubrick's method of directing actors. See, Kubrick was famous for demanding endless takes. He'd make actors do the same scene 50, 60, 70, sometimes over 100 times. He believed that somewhere in all those takes, he'd find the perfect moment, the perfect performance. To Kubrick, actors were just another element of the frame, like the lighting, like the camera angle. But to Duvall, this was torture disguised as perfectionism. How can he tell the difference between the first take and the 70th? Duvall asked in that interview. What's he even looking for? Duvall believed that actors give their best work in the first few takes, when emotions are fresh and instincts are sharp. After that, you're not getting better performances, you're just getting exhausted performances. You're draining the actor of everything real and authentic. His disgust with Kubrick's methods intensified after he watched the BBC documentary The Making of The Shining. There's a scene in that documentary that shows actress Shelley Duvall swinging a baseball bat at Jack Nicholson. She had to do that scene 127 times. 127 times. On camera, you can see Shelley Duvall breaking down, crying real tears, looking genuinely terrified. And Kubrick just kept saying coldly, "Do it again." When Duvall saw that footage, he was horrified. That wasn't directing, he said. That was torture. Because here's what Kubrick did: he didn't tell Shelley Duvall what he wanted different. He didn't give her notes or adjustments. He just made her repeat the scene over and over until she was emotionally and physically destroyed, and then he used that destroyed state as the performance. To Kubrick, that was genius. Creating real fear and exhaustion in an actress to make the horror feel authentic. To Duvall, it was abuse. But here's the really crazy part of this story. Kubrick actually reached out to Duvall once about working together. In the 1,990 seconds, Kubrick was developing a film called The Aryan Papers, about the Holocaust. He invited Duvall to discuss a potential role. Duvall agreed to the meeting, curious despite his reservations. They sat down together, and Kubrick talked for 30 minutes straight. About lighting patterns, about camera movements, about lens choices and frame composition. He never once mentioned emotion, never talked about the character's psychology, never asked Duvall about his approach to the role. The air in that room was colder than a morgue, Duvall told a reporter later. He walked out of that meeting knowing he'd never work with Kubrick, not because of money or scheduling, but because Kubrick saw actors as tools, not as artists. Years later, when Kubrick died in 1999, tributes poured in. Every major filmmaker called him a visionary genius. Robert Duvall gave an interview to Esquire magazine. He was a genius, Duvall said, but a genius without a heart. That single sentence turned parts of Hollywood against him. Critics accused him of disrespecting a legend. Film students wrote angry letters. But Duvall never apologized, never took it back. Because to him, being a great visual artist doesn't excuse treating actors like props, and Stanley Kubrick, for all his genius, was guilty of exactly that. Number 2. Robert De Niro. Now this one's different, because Robert Duvall never yelled at Robert De Niro, never argued with him publicly, never had a dramatic falling out. But the resentment? Absolutely real. Behind every polite handshake at award shows was quiet hostility. Duvall once summed up his feelings about De Niro in a single cutting remark. "He's good at playing Italians. Very good." On the surface, that sounds like a compliment, right? But it wasn't. Not even close. That was Duvall's way of saying that De Niro, for all his fame and acclaim, had turned acting into a circus. Wigs and makeup, extreme weight changes, elaborate accents, transformation for the sake of transformation, with no real depth underneath. Their rivalry started after The Godfather Part 2 in 1974. Both men became symbols of serious acting, the gold standard of the 1,970 seconds. But they approached their craft in completely opposite ways. Robert De Niro became famous for extreme physical transformations. For Taxi Driver, he shaved his head into a mohawk and lost a ton of weight to look gaunt and dangerous. For Raging Bull, he gained 60 pounds to play boxer Jake LaMotta in his later years. Then, he lost it all again for the earlier scenes. For Cape Fear, he covered himself in tattoos and built up massive muscles. Hollywood loved it. Critics praised his dedication. Awards poured in. But Duvall saw something else. He saw vanity disguised as art. "The work isn't in the weight gain," he once said. "It's in the silence." That quote became his subtle attack on De Niro's entire approach. What Duvall meant was this: real acting happens internally. It's about understanding who the character is deep down, their fears, their motivations, their secrets. Putting on a fake nose or gaining 60 pounds might look impressive, but it doesn't automatically make you a better actor. In Duvall's eyes, De Niro was obsessed with the external while ignoring the internal, and worse, Hollywood was rewarding that obsession, treating extreme physical changes like they were the same thing as actual emotional depth. Actors who worship method, Duvall told colleagues, risk becoming parodies of themselves. He never mentioned De Niro by name, but everyone knew who he was talking about. The tension between them was quiet but constant. At film festivals, they'd be seated at different tables. At tributes, they'd give speeches but never acknowledge each other. In interviews, when asked about other great actors, Duvall would mention Gene Hackman, James Caan, Tommy Lee Jones, but never Robert De Niro. The omission was deliberate. Then something interesting happened in the late 1990 seconds and 2000s. De Niro started doing comedies. Meet the Parents, Analyze This, Analyze That. He started playing himself, playing the tough guy stereotype for laughs. When Duvall heard about this shift, he reportedly muttered to a friend, "There's the mask cracking." What he meant was that De Niro's whole method acting persona was exactly that, a persona. A performance of being a serious actor. And now that he was doing broad comedies, the illusion was falling apart. De Niro, to his credit, never publicly fired back. When asked about Duvall in interviews, he'd say something diplomatic like, "Bob's a serious actor. We just have different energies." That was the public version. Privately, they avoided each other for decades. The sad part is, they could have been collaborators. Imagine a film with both of them. The intensity, the craft. Instead, ego and philosophy kept them apart. Duvall saw De Niro as proof that Hollywood valued spectacle over substance, and that's a grudge he's carried for 40 years. Number 1. Bruce Beresford. And now, the final name on this list. The most shocking one. Bruce Beresford. You might be thinking, who? He's a director, an Australian filmmaker who's made some good movies but isn't exactly a household name. So why does Robert Duvall hate him? Because Bruce Beresford directed Tender Mercies in 1983, the film that won Duvall his first and only Oscar. That's right. The man who helped him win an Oscar is someone he's hated ever since. Let me explain. Tender Mercies is a quiet, beautiful film about a washed-up country singer trying to rebuild his life. It's set in rural Texas, low-key, emotional, real. Duvall didn't just star in it, he poured his soul into it. He lived in Texas for months before filming. Learned to play guitar, wrote and performed original country songs, talked to real recovering alcoholics to understand his character. This was personal for him, a passion project. And Bruce Beresford, the director, made it a nightmare. During filming, Beresford ordered endless retakes. He kept saying Duvall's rhythm was wrong, his timing was off. Duvall would do a scene perfectly, with real emotion, and Beresford would say, "Do it again." In one argument, Duvall snapped back, "A drunk man never speaks slowly." He was trying to explain that his character, a recovering alcoholic, wouldn't have perfect, measured speech. He'd be rough around the edges, a little off-beat. But Beresford refused to listen, kept demanding that Duvall slow down, smooth it out, make it more cinematic. To Duvall, this was a director who didn't understand the character, didn't trust the actor. So he did something extreme. There's a key scene in Tender Mercies where Duvall's character performs a song in a church. It's the emotional centerpiece of the entire film. Beresford scheduled it for later in the day, wanted specific lighting. Duvall showed up at dawn, hours early, without telling anyone. He gathered a small crew, set up cameras, and filmed the entire scene himself. That stolen take, filmed without the director's knowledge or permission, became the version used in the final film. Think about that. The most important scene in the movie, the one that probably helped Duvall win his Oscar, was filmed in secret because he didn't trust his director. When the film came out, critics loved it. Audiences loved it. Awards season started. Tender Mercies won 2 Oscars, Best Original Screenplay and Best Actor for Robert Duvall. At the ceremony, Duvall walked up to the stage to accept his award. He thanked the screenwriter, thanked the crew, thanked his co-stars, but he deliberately, obviously skipped the director's name. The hall went silent. People looked at each other in confusion. Did he just forget? Or was that intentional? It was 100% intentional. The next morning, the Hollywood Reporter ran the headline, "Duvall ignores Beresford at the Oscars." The snub became instant Hollywood gossip. Beresford, hurt and angry, gave an interview to the Sydney Morning Herald. "I respect him as an actor," he said, "but we can never work together again." Duvall never apologized, never explained, never reached out. Years later, on Inside the Actors Studio, he was asked about Tender Mercies. "Sometimes," he said carefully, "you have to choose loyalty to the character over loyalty to someone else." That's the closest he's ever come to explaining what happened. The two never reconciled, never worked together again. Duvall went on to write and direct his own film The Apostle in 1997. It was his way of proving he didn't need anyone controlling his creative vision. He could do it himself and do it better. Beresford continued making movies quietly, good films. But every time Tender Mercies gets mentioned, critics remember that Oscar night. They remember the silence where a thank you should have been. And Robert Duvall? He has his Oscar. But he also has a grudge that's lasted over 40 years. So there you have it. 6 actors, 6 feuds, 6 names that shocked Hollywood when Robert Duvall finally spoke his truth. Al Pacino, the brother who chose money over loyalty. Francis Ford Coppola, the mentor who stopped fighting for him. Marlon Brando, the idol who became everything he hated about Hollywood. Stanley Kubrick, the genius who treated actors like props. Robert De Niro, the method actor whose transformations hid an empty core. And Bruce Beresford, the director he refused to thank even on Oscar night. What makes these stories so powerful is that Robert Duvall isn't some hothead or drama queen. He's one of the most respected actors in history, 7 Oscar nominations, over 100 films spanning 6 decades. For him to break his silence and name these enemies, that means something. It means the wounds never healed, the betrayals were never forgotten. And maybe, at 94 years old, he's finally tired of pretending everything was okay. Because here's what this whole video reveals about Robert Duvall. He values loyalty, respect, and craft above everything else. When someone violates those principles, he doesn't forgive. He doesn't forget. He just quietly removes them from his life and moves on. That's not bitterness. That's integrity. And honestly, that makes his legacy even more powerful. He built an incredible career while refusing to compromise his values, even when it meant losing friends, losing roles, and making enemies of Hollywood legends. Because trust me, there are so many more secrets hiding behind those perfect movie premieres. Thanks for watching. See you next time.